Three men are in the middle of a desert when their car breaks down. For their hike to town, they each decide to take one thing with them. One man takes a jug of water. The second man takes a sandwich. The last man takes one of the car doors. The first man says to the last man, "I'm bringing the water because if I get thirsty, I can take a drink. And it makes sense to bring a sandwich in case we get hungry. But why bring a car door?" The last man replies, "If I get hot, I can just roll down the window." Four men are in the hospital waiting room because their wives are having babies. A nurse goes up to the first guy and says, "Congratulations, you're the father of twins." "That's odd," answers the man. "I work for the Minnesota Twins." A nurse says to the second guy, "Congratulations, you're the father of triplets." "That's weird," answers the second man. "I work for the 3M company." A nurse tells the third man, "Congratulations, you're the father of quadruplets." "That's strange," he answers. "I work for the Four Seasons Hotel." The last man is groaning and banging his head against the wall. "What's wrong?" the others ask. "I work for 7-Up." A climber fell off a cliff, and as he tumbled down, he caught hold of a small branch. "Help! Is there anybody up there?" he shouted. A majestic voice boomed through the gorge. "I will help you, my son, but first you must have faith in me." "Yes, yes, I trust you," cried the man. "Let go of the branch," boomed the voice. There was a long pause, and the man shouted up again, "Is there anybody else up there?" A talking frog goes into a bank and approaches the teller. He sees right away from her window nameplate that her name is Patricia Black. "Miss Black, I would like to get a 30,000 pounds loan in order to take a holiday," he says. Patty looks at the frog in disbelief. In keeping with bank policy pertaining to customer relations, she asks the frog his name. The frog says that his name is Kermit Jagger, adds the fact that his dad is Mick Jagger, and that it is okay to give him the loan as he knows the bank manager personally. Patty explains that he will have to secure the loan with some collateral, to which the frog replies, "Sure, no problem, I have this," and produces a tiny porcelain elephant about half an inch tall, bright pink and perfectly formed. Very confused, Patty explains that she will have to consult with the bank manager and disappears into the back office. She finds the manager and says, "There's a frog at my window who says his name is Kermit Jagger. He claims to know you and says his dad is Mick Jagger, and he wants to use this as collateral." She holds up the tiny elephant. "I mean, what in the world is this thing?" The bank manager looks back at her and says, "It's a knick-knack, Patty Black. Give the frog a loan. His old man's a rolling stone." Larry Lobster and Sam Clam were best friends. They did everything together. The only difference between them is that Larry was the nicest lobster ever, and Sam, well, let's just say he was not so good. Larry and Sam did so much together that they even died together. Larry went to heaven and Sam went to hell. Larry was doing well in heaven, and one day St. Peter came up to him and said, "Larry, you know you are the nicest clam we ever had up here. Everyone likes you, but you seem to be a bit depressed. Tell me what is bothering you. Maybe I can help." Larry said, "Well, don't get me wrong, Pete. I like it up here and everything, but I really miss my good friend Sam Clam. We used to do everything together, and I really miss him a lot." St. Peter looked at Larry with pity and said to him, "I tell you what, I can arrange it so that you can go down to hell tomorrow and visit Sam all day. How would that sound?" This made Larry very happy, and he got up bright and early the next morning and grabbed his wings, his harp, and his halo, and got in the elevator to hell. When the doors opened, he was met by Sam. They hugged each other and they were off. You see, in hell, Sam owned a disco. They spent the day there together and had a great time. At the end of the day, Larry and Sam went back to the elevator together, said their goodbyes, and Larry got back in the elevator and went up to heaven. He stepped off the elevator and was greeted by St. Peter, who blocked the doorway to heaven. He looked at Larry and said, "Larry Lobster, didn't you forget something?" Larry looked around and said, "No, I don't think so. I have my halo and my wings." St. Peter looked at him and said, "Yes, but what about your harp?" Larry gasped and said, "I left my harp in Sam Clam's disco." A Texan visited Australia. A wheat farmer showed him his huge fields. "That's nothing," said the Texan. "We have fields 10 times bigger in Texas, and the wheat is taller." Then the owner of a sheep farm showed him his flock of sheep. "That's nonsense," said the Texan. "We have sheep 10 times more than yours, and they're bigger." At that moment, 3 kangaroos jumped across the road. "What's that?" the Texan asked with horror. The Australian replied, "Don't you have grasshoppers in Texas?" Forrest Gump dies and goes to heaven. At the pearly gates, St. Peter tells Forrest that he will have to answer 3 questions before he can enter heaven. Forrest agrees. St. Peter begins, "First, Forrest, tell me, how many days in the week begin with the letter T?" "Well," says Forrest, "I suppose there are 2, today and tomorrow." St. Peter laughs and says, "Forrest, that's not exactly what we had in mind, but you know you're right, so we'll accept that answer. Now the second question is, how many seconds are there in a year?" "That's a really hard question," says Forrest, "but I think I know the answer. It's 12. 12? Asks St. Peter in surprise. "How did you even come up with 12? "Well," says Forrest, "you have January 2nd, February 2nd, and so on." One of an Indian chief's responsibilities is to make sure his tribe is aware of any approaching bad weather. This particular chief was new on the job and inexperienced at predicting the weather. When asked by a brave if it was going to be a bad winter, he decided to take no chances and answered, "Yes, it's going to be very cold. Instruct all members of the tribe to gather as much firewood as possible." The tribe set to work and gathered a tremendous amount of wood, but the predicted bad weather never arrived. After several days, the chief went into town and paid a visit to the local weather bureau. "Are we going to have a bad winter?" the chief asked. The weather bureau chief answered, "Yes, it's going to be a very cold winter." Feeling better, the chief returned to the reservation. Another couple of weeks of nice weather went by, during which the tribe continued to gather all available firewood. Finally, the brave came to see the chief again and said, "Are you sure we're going to have a bad winter?" "Yes," the chief replied. "Continue gathering firewood." A few more days of nice weather passed, and the chief paid another visit to the weather bureau in town. The chief asked the weatherman, "Are you sure we're going to have a bad winter? It's been very warm." The man replied, "Yes, we're sure." "How can you be so sure?" the chief asked. "Because the Indians are gathering firewood like crazy," was the answer. Andrew was chatting with his buddies, and they were planning an upcoming fishing trip. Unfortunately, he had to tell them that he couldn't go this time as his wife wouldn't allow it. After much teasing and banter, Andrew went home upset. The next week, when Andrew's buddies came to the lake to camp, they were shocked to see him there. He was already sitting in the campsite with a cold beer, his stuff laid out, a fishing rod in hand, and a blazing fire. "How did you manage to talk the landlady into letting you go?" the buddies asked. "I didn't have to beg her," replied Andrew. "Yesterday, when I got home from work and plopped into a chair with a beer to drown my sorrow because I couldn't go fishing, the missus snuck up behind me, covered my eyes and said, 'Surprise!' When I pulled my hands away, she was standing there in a beautiful see-through negligee, and she said, 'Carry me into the bedroom, tie me to the bed, and do whatever you want.' So here I am."